How do dog years compare with human years?
It has long been thought that one dog year equals 7 human years. But many people believe another formula gives a more accurate picture. At age 1 a dog has the equivalent of 15 human years. At age 2 it has the equivalent of 24. After that, each additional year counts as 4 years. The average lifespan of a dog is 12 years, which, according to that formula, equals 64 human years. Large breeds tend to have shorter lives than this, and small breeds tend to live longer. The record is 20 years.
What are the 3 branches of the United States government?
When the U.S. Constitution was written in 1787, the people writing it, referred to as the framers of the Constitution, were very concerned with maintaining a balance between the power of the government and the freedoms of the citizens. The framers divided the federal government into 3 branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial. Each branch has its own separate, unique authority, known as the separation of powers. And each branch is limited by the powers of the other 2. This system of checks and balances ensures that no single branch of government has all the control. The executive branch, which is led by the president, also includes the vice president and the cabinet. The cabinet includes the attorney general and such departments as defense, treasury, labor, and agriculture. The legislative branch, called Congress, is responsible for making laws. This branch consists of the Senate and the House of Representatives. The elected officials in these houses can introduce and debate legislation. But as an example of checks and balances, the bills passed in the Senate and House of Representatives can't become laws until they are signed by the President. The President can veto, or reject, a bill, but if enough people in Congress, at least 2/3, vote to override that veto, the bill can become a law without the President's signature. The judicial branch, headed by the Supreme Court and also including the U.S. courts of Appeals and U.S. District Courts, explains the laws passed by the legislative branch and interprets whether these laws follow the principles laid out in the Constitution. The court system performs extremely important functions: resolving arguments between citizens and determining the guilt and possible punishment of people accused of crimes.
Why do people work?
People usually work to get the things that they need to live. The most basic needs are food, clothing, and shelter. In some places, people grow their own food, make their own clothes, and build their own shelters, living much as their ancestors have for thousands of years. In other places, people earn money to buy those things. Work in industrialized, or developed, nations frequently takes place in office buildings or factories. While some people still make their livings as farmers. The economies of such countries are based on advanced technologies and large-scale manufacturing, which create products and services that earn workers more money than people can make in the less industrial or developing countries of the world, where farming is the main industry, and most farmers can barely grow enough food for their own families. People who live in industrialized nations like the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and many countries in Europe are able to buy far more than the basic things they need to live. They are able to make their lives easier and safer by paying for clean water, electricity, good medical care, reliable transportation, and much more. Those who live in developing countries, located mainly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, still struggle to acquire the most basic necessities. It may be hard to believe, but it's nonetheless true that half of the world's people are malnourished, don't have enough of the right foods to be healthy, and 80% live in substandard housing, homes that are not clean and safe.
Do killer whales attack humans?
The killer whale, also known as orca, is a type of dolphin that can grow to be 31 feet. 9.5 meters, long and weigh 11,000 pounds, 5,000 kilograms. It eats fish, squid, and occasionally such sea mammals as seals and other dolphins. Despite its frightening name, the killer whale has never been known to attack a person. Killer whales are intelligent and, with their stark black and white coloring, dramatic-looking animals. They learn quickly and can perform complex tasks. Abilities that have made them a favorite at aquariums and marine parks.
Can a wish made on a shooting star come true?
Except for people who watch the skies a lot. Like weather specialists or astronomers, it is rare to spot a shooting star. The period of time that meteors are incandescent heated by friction with Earth's atmosphere and made to glow usually lasts only a second or two before they burn up. For hundreds of years, when people saw things in the sky that were rare or unusual like shooting stars or comets, they thought that they were signs from their god or gods predicting events, both good and bad, that would soon occur in their lives. Even though modern science has now provided us with practical explanations about what occurs in the sky, it can still be fun to believe once in a while that our lives are connected with what goes on up there. It doesn't hurt to make a wish sometimes. Wishing for something helps us come up with ways to turn a wish into a reality. But shooting stars have no special powers that help wishes come true.
What's the difference between a continent and a country?
A continent is a land mass that is generally, except in the cases of Australia and Antarctica, home to a number of countries. Continental boundaries are determined by geography rather than politics. Canada and the United States, for example, are part of the North American continent. Because they occupy the same land mass, not because they share a political system. A country, on the other hand, is a defined territory that governs itself and is recognized by the international community. A country's citizens live under the rule of their government and according to the nation's laws.
So why does a light bulb eventually burn out, then?
A light bulb doesn't really burn out. But during each intense heating, some of the tungsten in the filament vaporizes, breaking off into tiny particles that float in the argon. This process causes the filament to weaken in spots and eventually to break. The discoloration that you see on the inside surface of a worn-out light bulb is not caused by burn marks, but by a thin coating of evaporated tungsten.
What is a shooting star?
A shooting star, or falling star, is not really a star at all. It is actually a meteor, a small piece of matter usually made of stone and iron. Flying through space, a meteor becomes visible when it enters Earth's atmosphere. As it falls toward Earth, it becomes heated from friction with air molecules and becomes incandescent, giving off great light. Most meteors burn up completely before they hit the ground. If they do make it to Earth, they are called meteorites.
Why is genital hair curly even on people who have straight hair on their heads?
As with the hair on our heads, genital, or pubic, hair is curly and kinky because of the shape of the follicles. And that hair is thick and coarse because of the larger size of the follicles. When we go through puberty, many of the changes in our bodies result from the presence of certain hormones, which are chemicals that control body processes. We have hair follicles all over our bodies. And the hormone androgen affects follicles in several places: the genital area, underarms, and facial hair, changing those follicles during puberty to produce a thick, curly kind of hair. Men have much more androgen than women, which explains why women don't usually have coarse facial hair like men do.
Why do people have to die?
All living things must die. It is the final part of the biological cycle of life. A flowering plant, for instance, springs from a seed, grows. Blossoms, produces seeds for the next season, fades, and dies. Similarly, an animal is born, grows and matures, reproduces, ages, and dies. Old plants and animals must make way for new plants and animals, through which the cycle of life can continue. If plants and animals did not die, eventually there would not be enough food, water, or space in the world for life to flourish. Even dead plants and animals contribute to the cycle of life, for their remains enrich the soil for the next generation of living things. New generations of plants and animals are needed to ensure the survival of life on our planet. The world's environment is constantly changing, and new plants and animals with unique characteristics resulting from the combined genetic contributions of their parents may be better equipped to survive under the evolving conditions. This process of change and improved survival, which has taken place gradually over millions of years, ever since life began, is called evolution. Just like all plants and other animals, people also experience this biological cycle of life. A person is born, grows into physical maturity during adolescence, perhaps has a family in adulthood, ages, and then dies. At death, the cycle of life is completed as that individual makes way for following generations. But because people are such special beings, they can live on in so many other ways besides in the genetic makeup of their offspring after they die. A great painter or writer, for example, can live on in the work that he or she has left behind for others to enjoy. A politician may leave behind new laws that improve the lives of many. A parent or friend may live on in the minds and hearts of his or her loved ones, thanks to the experiences and affection that were shared and the memories left behind. The time that each person spends on earth, and every contribution he or she makes, however small, like planting a tree to make the world a little healthier, is an important part of the cycle of life and has an impact on future generations.
Why can I smell things better when I sniff hard?
The air that you breathe through your nose passes into your nasal cavity, making its way to your throat and lungs. Located on the top of your nasal cavity is your olfactory, or smell, center. There, scent particles from the air you breathe are caught in a thick batch of olfactory hairs that send nerve impulses via the olfactory nerve to your brain, which recognizes them as smells. When you breathe normally, the air that you take in is not usually directed toward your olfactory center. But when you sniff hard, you take in a lot more air, and it travels toward the top of your nasal cavity. You can detect smells more easily then. When you hold your nose to keep from smelling a bad scent, you breathe through your mouth, which keeps most of the incoming air from reaching in your olfactory hairs.
Why do people cry when someone dies?
Crying is a way of expressing sadness. It helps people who have lost someone close to them to express their grief and sorrow. Talking about the dead person also helps. People cry because they will never again see the person who has died, and they know they will miss that person. If the death is unexpected, the tears may also be caused by feelings of shock and anger. During the period immediately following a person's death, when the loss of that loved one is felt most sharply, grieving people are not comforted by the fact that dying is a natural and necessary process that happens to all living things. As time passes, however, they begin to accept the loss of their loved one, and the pain of that loss becomes easier to bear. Thinking of the person after some time has passed brings less sadness and maybe even some pleasure, as good times with the loved one are remembered.
Do cats really have 9 lives?
Do animal has more than a single life? But cats do seem to survive dangerous situations that would likely hurt or kill other animals. Most remarkable cat survival stories involve the animals falling from high places. Cats love to perch on top shelves or at window sills to get a good view of their surroundings. Their narrow, flexible bodies and great sense of balance allow them to climb into some pretty unusual places. They rarely fall from their high perches, but when they do, they usually end up with little or no damage. One reason for this is that cats have the ability to twist and turn themselves around in midair, landing on all 4 feet. Also, their flexible muscles and skeletons help their bodies absorb the impact of falls without getting hurt. Some cats have survived long falls from the windows of high-rise buildings without a scratch. Their natural characteristics seem to give them more lucky chances than other animals, hence the saying that cats have 9 lives.
Why do I pee?
Food provides the energy that you need for your body systems to run smoothly. Once food is broken down during digestion into small bits of useful substances called nutrients, it passes into your bloodstream. While circulating through your body, nutrients are absorbed by your cells, where they are used for processes that release energy. As nutrients and energy are used up, chemical waste products are left in your cells. These must be removed or the cells will eventually die. So the cells release waste into your bloodstream, the body's transportation system, which take the waste to your 2 kidneys, containing more than 1 million microscopic filters each. Your kidneys remove waste products like urea from your blood, along with any extra body water. The waste and water mixture that the kidneys produce is called urine. It travels through tubes called ureters to your bladder, a flexible, balloon-like structure where urine is temporarily stored before you urinate, or pee. When your bladder has about 1 cup of urine in it, stretch sensors located in its wall send fullness signals to your brain, which then directs you to empty it.
What is the biggest city in the world?
Because most big cities spread out, over time, into the land that surrounds them. It is often hard to say where a city begins and ends. When describing the size of a city, which generally refers to its population, or the number of people that live there, sometimes a distinction is made between the city itself, city proper, and the built-up areas around it, urban agglomeration. Another problem in finding the largest city in the world is that censuses official counts of populations are such big and difficult projects that they are only done every decade or so. And a lot of people can come and go in 10 years. According to a 1997 United Nations count, Seoul, the capital city of South Korea in East Asia, is the most populous city in the world. Nearly 10.25 million people live there. When their surrounding urban areas are included in a population count, some of the world's other largest cities are Tokyo, Japan, New York City, United States, Mexico City, Mexico, and Bombay, India. Mexico City is also one of the world's fastest growing cities.
Do bats really suck blood?
There are more than 1,000 different kinds of bats. They live all over the world, except in the coldest regions. Most bats eat insects, lots of them helping to protect food crops and other plant life. Some bats also eat fruit, as well as the nectar of flowers. There is only one kind of bat that drinks blood. Called the vampire bat, it lives in South America, Central America, and Mexico. Vampire bats are pretty small, their bodies only about 3 inches, 8 centimeters, long. They have big pointed ears and sharp teeth, which they use to quietly bite their victims while they are sleeping. In the saliva of the vampire bat is a substance known as an anticoagulant, which keeps the blood from clotting. They often bite livestock farm animals like horses and cows, and they, like many types of bats, can spread rabies through their bites.
What is an eclipse of the sun?
Once in a while the moon passes directly in front of the sun as it makes its way around Earth. It temporarily blocks out the sun, casting a shadow on a portion of Earth that is experiencing day. when this total eclipse of the Sun, a solar eclipse, occurs. The part of Earth affected becomes dark and cold until the Moon passes by. Surrounding areas experience a partial eclipse, where just part of the Sun is temporarily covered by the Moon.
What do B, C and AD mean?
B. C stands for before Christ, while AD is short for the Latin phrase Anno Domini, which means in the year of the Lord. Some mistakenly believe those letters to stand for after death. These designations, established around AD 523 by a monk named Dionysius Exiguus, mark the year of Jesus Christ's birth as the beginning of the Christian era. Everything that happened before Jesus Christ was born is labeled as BC. And everything after is considered to be part of the Christian era and is labeled as AD. The years before the birth of Christ count down, or are counted backwards, to his birth, ending in 1 BC. The Christian era begins. With the year AD 1, there was no year 0. Fairly soon after, Dionysius's system was put in place. Discoveries were made that showed he had miscalculated the year of Jesus Christ's birth. But in spite of his error, his system remains the standard in use around the world. This system of counting years is based on the Christian religion. And yet it is used even in countries that have citizens of other religions. Many people prefer that non-religious terms should be used, with the abbreviations BCE or before Common Era, replacing BC and CE or Common Era, replacing AD. But the usage of BC and AD are still far more common than any alternatives.
If evergreens keep their needles all year long, why are there so many on the ground?
A conifer doesn't keep each of its needle-like leaves forever. The needles usually have a 3 or 4 year lifespan, after which they are shed. A conifer is different from a deciduous tree in that it loses its leaves gradually, rather than all at once. So a conifer always looks green. The same thick outer covering that keeps evergreen needles from losing water in their often dry environments also keeps them from decaying quickly once they are discarded. That is why you see so many dry needles on the ground under mature evergreens. It takes a long time for these needles to decompose, especially compared to the leaves that fall off deciduous trees.
How many numbers are there?
Numbers are unlimited, or infinite, which means that you could go on counting them forever. One man, Edward Kastner, asked his young nephew, Milton Serrata, to come up with a name for the huge number he was working with, which was a 1 with 100 zeros after it. The boy called it a googol. While the googol is the largest number with a name, there are numbers much larger than googols. So big that you could never write all their zeros down during your lifetime.
What are feathers made of?
Birds have many different kinds of feathers, each of which performs a different function. Some feathers, the small, soft down used in pillows and winter jackets, are designed to keep the bird warm, others are specifically used for flight. While some feathers are pure decoration, intended to help the bird find a mate. Feathers consist of a shaft in the middle with pairs of branches, called barbs, attached. The surface formed by the barbs is called the vane. On the feathers of some birds, the barbs in turn have smaller branches called barbules. The barbules from one barb connect to those of the barb next to it by little hooks, making the feather stiffer and stronger. Before the invention of the modern ink pen, people filled the hollow shafts of feathers, called quills, with ink and used them as writing instruments. In societies all over the world, people have also used feathers to decorate clothing or hats, or to make garments worn during important ceremonies.
How can animals live in a desert?
The harsh conditions of desert life present many problems for the animals living there. Temperatures get extremely high. Water is scarce, and food supplies, whether in the form of plants or other animals, dwindle. Desert animals have developed numerous techniques, however, to adapt to their unique climate. Just as animals living in cold climates hibernate in winter, so do some desert animals live through dry periods by becoming dormant, or inactive. Desert toads bury themselves deep in the ground, emerging only after a rainfall to get water and food and to breed. Many desert animals live in underground burrows or in caves. Such animals spend hot, dry days in their dens, away from the sun, coming out in the early morning or at night when it's cooler. Several desert animals are especially equipped to handle hotter temperatures. The large ears of jackrabbits can release heat while they rest in the shade. Owls and some other birds release body heat through their open mouths, letting their saliva evaporate to cool down their bodies. Many desert residents have pale fur, feathers, scales, or skin. An adaptation that means they absorb less of the sun's heat. They also blend in better with their sandy surroundings, which means they are less visible to predators. The meat eaters in the desert can sometimes get all of the moisture they need from eating their prey. Or, in the case of vultures, from eating carrion, or the flesh of already dead animals. Other desert animals are able to conserve the moisture they do get in amazing ways. The kangaroo rat, for example, can actually create water from the dry seeds it eats. And its kidneys can remove most of the water from its urine, sending the water back through the rat's bloodstream. Thanks to their ability to fly. Birds probably have the easiest time escaping the desert's difficult conditions. They can fly great distances if necessary to find areas where rain has fallen and vegetation is growing. Large winged birds can spend the hottest part of the day soaring way up high where the winds are cooler.
What is a single parent?
A single parent is either a mother or a father who raises her or his children alone without being married or in a long-term, committed relationship. This situation usually happens because the parent divorces or the parent's husband or wife dies. But some people decide ahead of time to raise a child without the help of a partner for at least a part of their lives. Almost half of the children in the United States are raised by a single parent. While many people picture the typical family as two parents and their kids, that view of the family doesn't match up with the way numerous people are raised today. Some people have two parents who live together. Some people's parents are divorced, some only have one parent. And some kids are raised by grandparents or aunts and uncles, or by foster parents who take care of them when their biological parents can't. A family can be defined in many ways, and the most important thing is to be raised by people who love and support you, rather than trying to fit in with anyone's definition of a typical family.
So why is it called the bald eagle?
Because one meaning of the word bald that is not commonly used anymore refers to white markings. Due to excessive hunting, environmental pollution, and loss of habitat, the bald eagle population became dangerously low at one point, prompting the U.S. Congress to pass a law protecting it. Bald eagles were once listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an endangered species, meaning they were close to being extinct. Thanks to the laws protecting it, these birds have rebounded a bit. They are now listed as threatened, which means they are not as close to being extinct as they once were. But their numbers are still few, only about 50,000 in the United States, and it is illegal to hunt them.
How big can a giant squid get?
Squids range in size from tiny, less than 3/4 of an inch, or 1.5 centimeters, to gigantic. The giant squid, scientifically known as the Archaeoteuthis, can reach 65 feet. 20 meters, in length, with tentacles that are close to 20 feet, 6 meters, long. The eye of a giant squid can be as big as a foot, 30 centimeters, across. They can weigh nearly a ton, 2,000 pounds, or 908 kilograms. Giant squids are the largest invertebrates ever to have lived. Scientists don't know much about the giant squid, and what they do know comes entirely from observations of dead specimens that have been washed up on shore or found in the stomachs of sperm whales. Giant squid's number one, and possibly only, predator. Although numerous scientific teams have searched for giant squids using some of the most sophisticated tracking equipment available, none has been able to catch sight of this mysterious animal. Part of the problem in finding a giant squid in its natural habitat is that these creatures may live in the deepest part of the ocean, a very difficult area for humans to explore. Because so little is known for sure about giant squids, many myths and stories have been told over the years about this supposedly ferocious sea monster attacking ships and eating people. No such stories have ever been proven, however, and many scientists believe they are completely inaccurate.
What are killer bees?
Killer bees are the result of a scientific experiment begun in the mid-1950s, when European honeybees and African bees, which are accustomed to hot temperatures, were brought to Brazil and bred with each other in an effort to create a honeybee that would produce honey in hot, tropical climates. The experiment was a big failure because, unlike the mild-mannered European honeybee, the new Africanized honeybee had an aggressive nature. Quick to attack intruders, the new bees have been responsible for a number of human deaths. The danger of these bees comes from their tendency to attack in swarms. If a person is stung by enough bees at one time, it could trigger a severe allergic reaction. These killer bees have made their way into the southern United States. But the American beekeeping industry is working on ways to correct this experiment gone wrong.
When were knives, forks, and spoons first used?
While knives have been used as tools, weapons, and even to help in food preparation to carve up large pieces of meat. For example, it wasn't until the Middle Ages, a period ranging from roughly AD 500 to around 1500, that people began regularly using knives to get food from their plates to their mouths. Since forks weren't in use yet, people in that era used knives with narrow blades and pointed ends to spear their food and then eat it. Historians have pointed out that these weapon-like utensils gave the dinner hour the potential for serious violence. In the late 1600s, table knives became blunter and wider, a shape that made them more useful in catching the food that sometimes fell off forks and spoons. People have been using spoons for centuries, and these helpful scoopers were probably among the first eating tools developed by early humans. In prehistoric times, spoons were made of curved pieces of shells or wood. During the Middle Ages, royal and wealthy citizens used spoons made of precious metals like gold and silver. Common folks had to make do with tin or pewter spoons. As eating instruments, forks are the latecomers in the utensil world. while the ancient Greeks used two-tined forks to stabilize food they were carving and serving. And table forks were used by the wealthy in the Middle East and other countries in what is now Eastern Europe. The concept of table forks did not become widespread in Western Europe until the 16th and 17th centuries. At first, people didn't understand the need for a fork. They had spoons and knives and, of course, their hands, to pick up food. But forks came to be popular symbols of social status among the wealthy. And eventually the general population came to accept their use as well. Another kind of utensil, chopsticks, came into being around 5,000 years ago in China. Historians believe chopsticks evolved from twigs people used to grab pieces of food out of large cooking pots. Over time, these twigs were carved into sticks that worked well when picking up small pieces of food. By AD 500, chopsticks had spread to other Asian countries, with some differences among them in style and size.
Why do men and women marry?
Throughout the centuries and in different parts of the world, men and women have married for a variety of reasons. It used to be common for young people to marry the person their parents chose for them. And some cultures continue to practice arranged marriages. Throughout most of the world today, however, a man and a woman usually marry because they love each other and want to be together and care for one another for the rest of their lives. Adults often want to have children together and raise them in a family. While people don't have to be married in order to have children. Many people feel more comfortable raising a family as part of a married couple. When a man and a woman marry, they make their permanent partnership public. After a marriage ceremony, they are connected by a legal contract or agreement, a marriage license that can only be dissolved by another legal decree known as a divorce. Though death legally ends a marriage as well. Marriage grants a couple a new legal and social status, changing such things as the way they pay taxes and the amount they pay for health insurance. Many employers, for instance, extend an employee's health insurance benefits to that person's wife or husband and children, if two people live together and have children but are not married. The employee's family often cannot participate in the company's health plan.
Why do I have to get shots even when I'm not sick?
The shots that you get when you're not sick are called vaccinations or immunizations. They prevent you from getting certain serious infectious diseases like polio, tetanus, and diphtheria. Not too long ago, before vaccinations were used, people, especially young children, died in large numbers from such diseases. Most infectious diseases are communicable, which means they are easily passed from one person or animal to another, through infected air, contaminated food and drink, or an opening in the skin. Ordinarily, when disease-causing germs, viruses or bacteria, invade your body, your immune or defense system springs into action to get rid of the foreign organisms. Your white blood cells produce substances called antibodies that attack and destroy the invaders, helping you to recover. The antibodies remain in your body, ready to attack the same germs before any illness develops should they ever invade again. After having one infection, you are said to have developed a natural immunity to those particular germs. But you can also become immune to certain disease-causing germs through vaccinations. Developing immunity through vaccinations is a whole lot safer than developing it naturally from having a serious illness. Taken into the body by mouth, swallowed, or injected in a shot. Vaccinations are dead or harmless versions of specific disease-causing germs. These inactive germs are unable to cause sickness but can still make the body's immune system produce antibodies against them. So if a vaccinated person is exposed to the live germs in the future, antibodies will already be present in his or her body, waiting to attack before any illness can start. Sometimes it takes several doses of a vaccine spread out over time to produce full immunity in an individual. The immunity given by other vaccines may weaken after a number of years and have been strengthened with a booster shot.
What is an uncle?
An uncle is the brother of your mother or father. He can also be the man who marries your mother or father's sister. You may also know a man who is not related to you, a close family friend who loves and encourages you. For example, that you refer to as your uncle.
How do vines climb?
Some plants, referred to as vines, need support to grow to their full height. Vines climb in different ways. Some have soft, twisting stems or tendrils that they use to climb up other, stronger plants or supports. In such vines, once they touch supports, hormones make their stems grow more quickly on one side than the other, producing clinging spirals. Other climbing plants have special growths, like tiny aerial roots or pad-like suckers on their stems, that help them cling to walls and trees. Still others use hook-tipped leaves or sharp thorny spines like climbing roses to hold onto upright surfaces. Vines occur in many different groups of plants. They can be deciduous, losing their leaves in winter, or evergreen, keeping their leaves year-round, and they can live one season, annuals, or many, perennials. Some vines commonly found in gardens include grapes, zucchinis, and bougainvillea.
How do trains run?
A train is a series of unpowered cars pulled along tracks by a locomotive, or engine. The locomotive is run by a motor, either electric or a diesel-electric combination, that provides the power that turns its wheels, moving the engine and the cars attached to it. A single locomotive can pull dozens and dozens of cars. Some trains reach more than a mile in length. Electric motors are used only for trains that run over the same track for short distances. They receive electricity from wires that run above the track. Trolleys and streetcars are types of electric trains. A subway train is powered by electricity delivered through a third rail on its tracks. Unlike electric engines, diesel-electric engines can provide the amount of power needed to propel locomotives that travel long distances and pull great weights. Burning diesel oil powers a generator that creates electricity. The electricity powers motors that turn the wheels. For many decades, before diesel oil was used, locomotive engines were powered by superheated steam, made by burning coal or wood in large furnaces.
Why are there 7 days in a week?
Scholars are not sure why it was decided that a week is 7 days long. There are many different theories. The beginning of the Bible states that the world was made in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested. This biblical source, however, does not explain the 7-day week established in societies that did not know of or follow the teachings of the Bible. One widely held theory explains that in ancient times, many civilizations all over the world believed that each day was governed by either the sun, the moon, or one of the 5 planets that were then known. Because each of the 7 astronomical bodies ruled one day, there were 7 days in a week. Before the 7-day week became widely accepted, many societies based their week on the amount of time between market days. If it was decided that farmers needed 9 days to accumulate and transport their goods to the marketplace, and the market day was the 10th day, then the week was 10 days long.
Why is kindergarten important?
In the United States, public schooling begins with kindergarten, when a child is about 5 years old. Kindergarten is a half day of classes in an elementary school. While most of the activities in kindergarten are play activities like singing, storytelling, and drawing, children are also learning basic skills through these activities that they will need throughout their lives. These skills include listening to directions, using their time well, and working in cooperation with others. Kindergarten helps children adjust to school slowly, going only a few hours each day. It bridges the gap between the age when kids spend their days playing, at home, or in daycare or nursery school, and the more formal learning that will begin once a child enters the 1st grade. A German educator named Friedrich Frobel opened the first Kindergarten in 1837. Its name is German for Garden of Children.
How can you tell how old a tree is?
When a branch or the trunk of a tree is cut, you can see a series of rings inside. If you count each ring, you can tell how many years the tree has lived. Each year a tree grows a new layer of wood just below its bark, making the tree's trunk wider and wider as time goes by. The rings inside a tree often vary in size. In some years a tree has more of the things that it needs, like water to produce food, which allows it to produce more new tissue. In a year with very little water, on the other hand, less new tissue would be produced, resulting in a smaller ring.
What is hibernation?
During the coldest winter months, some animals migrate, traveling hundreds or even thousands of miles to a warmer climate. Others stay in their wintry homes, preparing for the cold by putting on extra fat, stockpiling food, and creating cozy dens where they will be protected from wind and snow. A few animals survive freezing temperatures by slowing everything down: their breathing, heart rate, body movements, and entering into a dormant, or inactive, state called hibernation. Animals that are true hibernators lower their body temperatures close to the freezing point. 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, and spend the winter in a state close to death. They cannot be easily wakened, and they don't appear to be breathing at all. In fact, they breathe a few times a minute. Among mammals, true hibernators include some types of bats, some rodents, like squirrels, and hedgehogs. These animals will wake up from their dormant state every few weeks to eat something, and then they return to hibernation. Bears and many other large animals are not true hibernators. They do spend much of the winter sleeping, but their body temperatures don't lower much, and they can be awakened easily. The summer version of hibernation experienced by some animals that live in extremely hot, dry desert regions is called estivation.
What is pollution?
Pollution refers to excessive amounts of waste, much of which contains harmful poisons that are released into the environment: air, water, and soil. Pollution is usually caused by people. More specifically, it is caused by the waste produced by the cars we drive, the factories that make the things we buy, the power plants that produce the gas and electricity we use, and even the farms that grow the food we eat. Pollution has been a problem ever since large numbers of people occupied a relatively small space. During the 1800s and 1900s, however, as the world became increasingly crowded, and more factories were built, environmental pollution became a serious issue. Air pollution is caused primarily by the burning of fuel. Gas-powered transportation methods, airplanes, cars, boats, and trains are the biggest culprits. The amount of fuel required to heat and cool homes and other buildings also contributes huge amounts of air pollution. Air pollutants damage Earth's atmosphere and harm plants and animals, including humans. Water pollution comes from a variety of sources. Any factory that makes things, toys, tires, steel, creates waste products as well. This waste, filled with toxic chemicals, is often released into bodies of water, including lakes, rivers, and oceans. Other harmful water pollutants include sewage, which is human and animal waste. Most sewage is somewhat filtered in septic tanks and treatment plants. But some raw sewage still gets released into water. The chemicals used to control pests and fertilize plants on farms also ends up in lakes and rivers when rainwater drains from the farmland to the bodies of water. Ships carrying massive quantities of oil have also been responsible for polluting the water. If those ships break apart, the oil spills into the water, killing birds and fish and damaging the shoreline. The world's oceans and rivers can break down some pollutants into forms that are either harmless or beneficial to aquatic life. But when pollution levels become too high, the plants and animals living in the water suffer. Land pollution comes primarily from garbage. Some types of garbage: paper, plastic, some metals, glass, and so on are recyclable, meaning they can be processed and reused. Some garbage is biodegradable, which means it will naturally break down into tiny particles that can be reused by the environment. Vast quantities of the garbage we produce, however, is not easily broken down or recycled. Garbage is usually dumped in landfills, and as some things slowly decay, a harmful gas called methane is released into the air. Another source of land pollution are the chemicals used on farms. Some of those chemicals are washed into bodies of water, and some are absorbed by the ground where they can harm various forms of plant and animal life.
How did the months of the year get their names?
The months of the year in the Gregorian calendar, used by most of the world, originated with the ancient Romans, who named the months after gods and goddesses, important emperors, and in some cases the month's position on the calendar. For example, January is named for Janus, a Roman god. Janus had two faces, one looking into the past and the other into the future. August commemorates the Roman Emperor Octavian, who was known as Augustus Caesar. The names for September through December were all taken from the words for numbers. September, for example, was at one time the seventh month in the calendar, and its name came from the word septem, meaning seven.
Why are some flying insects drawn to lights at night?
Scientists aren't exactly sure why this happens. They have noticed that on clear nights, when the moon is visible, fewer insects gravitate to artificial lights. This observation has given rise to a theory, for millions of years. Insects have used the light of the moon, coming from one direction above to guide them during night flight. But artificial lights, which put out rays of illumination in all directions, confuse this ancient navigational system. Flying in a straight line is impossible when an insect is around an artificial light, which causes it to fly in circles.
Why do we have daylight saving time?
Daylight saving time, DST, came about as a way to adjust clocks during the summer months, when days are longer, to make better use of the daylight hours. Countries began making such clock adjustments during World War I. 1914 to 1918, to save on the fuel needed for artificial light. If people could adjust their clocks so that it got dark at 9 p.m. instead of 8 p.m., then they could turn their lights on 1 hour later, or not at all if they simply went to bed when it got dark. These energy savings have continued today since it gets dark later in the evening. People don't turn on lights until later in the day. And in the summer, the sun rises very early and is usually up when people awake, reducing the need to turn on lights first thing in the morning. In the fall, as the days begin to get shorter, we go back to standard time, which means that the sun sets and rises at an earlier time of day. As the days get shorter, the amount of time between sunrise and sunset shrinks, so that in the heart of winter daylight arrives later in the day and departs earlier than in the spring and summer months. In the United States, daylight saving time, as decided by Congress, begins at 2 a.m. on the first Sunday in April and ends at 2 a.m. on the last Sunday in October, when DST begins. People move their clocks forward 1 hour. When it ends in October, clocks are moved back 1 hour. If you have trouble remembering which direction the clocks should go at which time of year, just think of the expression spring forward, fall back. Many other countries in the world observe some form of daylight saving time, though the exact starting and ending dates differ.
Why do some kids occasionally wet the bed in their sleep?
Usually, when you are asleep and your full bladder sends a message to your brain that it needs to be emptied. Your brain wakes you up so that you can go to the bathroom. But once in a while you sleep through the message and wet the bed. Bedwetting is a common occurrence in children up to about 5 years of age. Because muscle control and nervous systems are still immature then. But older children can have the condition, too, called enuresis, and doctors really don't know why. A lot more boys than girls experience bedwetting when they are older, and it seems to run in families. While challenging to deal with, the condition nearly always goes away by itself before adolescence. If a thorough check by a doctor reveals that no physical abnormality is the cause, a child can do a couple of things to limit bedwetting: drink only small amounts of liquids in the evening, and set an alarm clock to wake up during the night and empty the bladder so that an accident will not occur.
Do plants feel when they are cut?
Plants don't have nervous systems like animals do. The nervous system of an animal controls its actions and reactions to its environment. In complex animals, special senses send information, electrochemical impulses, along nerve pathways to their brains about things occurring inside and outside their bodies. Without such a message system, plants can't feel or react like animals do. So plants don't feel when they are cut. But plants do respond to things in their environment, like gravity, light, and even touch. Chemical messengers called hormones tell special cells and tissues how to respond to different conditions inside and outside a plant. Hormones tell seedlings to grow up from the ground, away from the pull of gravity. They tell houseplants to turn their leaves toward windows, where light comes in. They tell certain insect-eating plants to snap their leaves shut when prey lands there. They tell other plants to develop fruit following pollination. Although the many hormones that affect the lives of plants are not fully understood by scientists, it is clear that plants function remarkably well, though in very different ways from animals.
Where do seashells come from?
Seashells are more than just pretty souvenirs to take home from a trip to the beach. Shells are the hard outer coverings, or exoskeletons, of small, soft-bodied, invertebrate animals. Most animals that live in seashells are called mollusks. Some live in the water and others live on the shore. Some mollusks, usually the ones called bivalves, named because their shells are divided into a left and right valve, are delicacies for humans, like mussels, clams, oysters, and scallops. Snails are also mollusks. Seashells are made mostly of calcium carbonate and other minerals found in the sea. The shell is formed in layers when the mantle, a tissue that is part of the mollusk's body, secretes a substance that hardens. Some shells have a glistening, pinkish-orange interior that is called nacre, or mother of pearl. Seashells come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. Some are curvy spirals, others are spiny. Others are fan-shaped with grooves spreading across the surface and a glorious range of colors. Scientists aren't exactly sure why some shells are shaped or colored the way they are. though they believe certain shapes help the mollusk burrow into the sand or intimidate its enemies. And certain colors help to camouflage the shell from predators.
What is the largest animal in the world?
The largest animal in the world is the blue whale. It can reach a length of 110 feet, 33.5 meters, and weigh more than 150 tons, 300,000 pounds. Its head makes up nearly 1/4 of its body, and its heart is the size of a small car. It is thought to be the largest animal that has ever lived, bigger than the largest dinosaur. Even a baby blue whale is bigger than an elephant, which is the largest land animal. There are two types of whales: toothed whales, which use their teeth to catch fish and squid, that they usually swallow whole, and baleen whales, which are toothless, but have sheets of a horny substance called baleen attached to their upper jaws. The baleen works like a giant strainer, letting water including tiny plant and animal life called plankton move back and forth through it. Loads of plankton are trapped behind the baleen and then swallowed. The blue whale is an example of a baleen whale, which means that the largest creature in the world feeds on some of the smallest plants and animals that exist.
Who decides how a country is run?
A country is run by its government. Countries around the world are run by many different kinds of governments. In some countries, a written law called a constitution states what kind of government will be used. It outlines the government's powers and duties, along with rights of the people governed by it. A constitution is agreed upon at the time a country is founded or is adopted at a later date by a country's leaders. Sometimes rules about how a country is governed are not written down, but are commonly known and followed, becoming long-standing traditions. Many monarchies, for instance, in which a king or queen rules and another member of the royal family takes the throne after he or she dies, are examples of this. In such countries, the rules about who will inherit the throne are not written down as law but are decided amongst the royals. In many nations, government leaders get their authority to rule from the citizens of their countries. This authority is granted when people vote leaders into office during elections. Rulers chosen in this way are usually called presidents or prime ministers, and their governments are considered democracies because the power to govern is granted to the leader by the majority of their citizenry. If the citizens of a democracy feel that their leader is doing a poor job running the country, they can remove him or her from office in another election. Many people think that a democracy is the best form of government because citizens have some control over their lives and their country through their government representatives. There are other forms of government in which the authority to lead is given to an individual by just a few powerful citizens or is inherited for life. A government that is led by one person who has complete or absolute power over the citizens is called a dictatorship. Some dictators known as tyrants take charge of the country by force rather than by being appointed. Such rulers generally run governments that disregard the needs of their people because they aren't required by law to answer to their people's needs. They can only be removed from their positions of power by others like them who possess greater force. When such rulers and their governments are overthrown, the process is often violent and bloody.